Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey, Lamar, how's it going today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Tom? How are you today?
Well, I'm coming out of the fog, man. I'm coming out of the fog.
You've been a little foggy lately, haven't you?
I've been a little foggy ever since my surgery back on January 30th. Yeah.
It takes a while to get the old neurons firing again.
Yeah, it does. It does take a little bit to get the neurons firing. So now I know you know this, but our faithful listeners don't know this. But they actually had to abort the surgery, and right. They were not able to complete it. They got part of the way into it, and they got worried about what my heart was doing, and they were thinking that maybe they lost my pulse, and so everything got shut down. So I'm still a candidate for surgery at some point, but we don't know when that's going to be. And we're trying to figure out with the cardiologist and with the surgeon, what the heck happened, and try to make a decision about whether it's actually safe to go ahead and try to do the surgery. So that's kind of where we are. It's
so you went under general anesthesia. And you were all into the surgery. And so actually, other than recovering from the trauma of other parts of the surgery, you still had a lot of recovery to do just from that.
I did. I still had quite a bit of recovery. I mean, I don't do general anesthesia very well anyway.
Yeah.
And I know. In fact, as you know, I have to kind of put up a wall around me so that I'm not interacting much with people while I'm coming out of the effects of general anesthetic, because I become filterless. It's not just that my filters are weakened. I just become filterless. And I'm not necessarily the most pleasant person to engage with when that is happening. That's why we cut our previous podcasts in early January, is so that we would have something to run and didn't depend upon me being, a total jerk. Or didn't give me the opportunity to be a total jerk, right? So
you've been kind of fun, but
yeah. Okay.
But it's good to see you back. Good to see you clicking on all cylinders again.
Well, I'm not sure I'm clicking on all cylinders, but I would say I'm clicking on maybe 7 of 8. Okay. And right. I still have my moments, or, I'm a little spacey here and there. So if I zone out for a little bit, just ignore me. Just keep on going. So what about you?
Oh gosh, it's been a bit frustrating here in Kansas. The weather's been weird. We had some warm time, and then it got cold. It is Arctic cold. And we've had a lot of snow. And I woke up this morning, it was 9 degrees below zero. Oh. And as of this recording, we're at 2 degrees. So it's kind of warmed up to the high for today, I think. Yeah. So, wow. And then on top of that, both my wife and I became quite sick with a respiratory virus. And it's like, you know what? I'm just so ready for spring to be here. This is just nuts. So anyway,
was this one of the big respiratory viruses like COVID or RSV or anything like that?
Not sure, but let's put it this way: it put me in bed for almost 4 days.
Wow.
And I did go to the doctor, who we didn't do any testing, but he told me this is what you need to do, and that's what I did. And eventually got mostly over it. I still have this residual cough and stuff, so hopefully it won't interfere today. But that being said, I am ready for spring. I am ready to move past this crazy weather. and get
Yeah.
into something a little bit more pleasant outside. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
kind of
good.
where I'm at. And yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you and I have been kind of processing here lately. So that'll be
Yeah.
kind of fun. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
anything
we
else?
should
Go
probably
ahead.
we should probably let people know that we may not look quite the same because
Right.
the software we typically record on, we couldn't get the darn thing to work very well today. And so we just punted and went to Zoom. And so Zoom has an entirely different kind of look to it than what the other one does. So if you're listening to this on audio, it won't matter to you. But if you're trying to watch it on YouTube, it's gonna look a little bit different. So,
So, Tom, are you drinking Colombian coffee today?
well, I did earlier.
Oh,
I've
okay.
cut back on some of my coffee
Mm.
because of the health issues.
We do in the show notes talk a little bit about the fact we consume quite a bit of Colombian coffee in our whole
We
process.
do, we
So,
do, yes. But I had mine earlier today. So,
okay.
well,
Well,
this is we decided this was just going to be kind of a table talk today, and it's
yeah.
almost kind of a potpourri table talk, right? We just got all kinds of
Yeah.
okay. All right, Lamar. I would like potpourri for 200.
Well, we have talked about doing table talks and why that's so meaningful to both of us, because
Yeah,
that's kind of how we grew up, right?
that's right.
So much was done around the kitchen table, in our farmhouses with our immediate families, with our parents, or with neighbors that would drop in, or if we had like a salesperson or somebody that we needed to meet with, we always met around the kitchen table on the farmhouse.
Even
And
with people we didn't like. Yeah.
sometimes, so do you remember the Watkins man? I don't know if you had the Watkins man come. The
Uh,
salesman that had everything from elixirs to you know um, vanilla and food
yeah.
additives and that kind of thing. We'd always
I
meet
don't
around the
remember the
kitchen table.
Watkins guy. I remember Schwan. Oh my God.
Oh
And there's
yeah,
still Schwan. I mean, I see Schwan trucks running around every now and then, and
right.
they, yeah, I love their stuff, but not these days there's not much of it I can eat. But it's
Probably not.
am I looking thinner, by the way? I have lost 7 pounds in the
Oh
last three
my.
weeks. Yes.
Well,
Yes. Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Surgery will do that to you, especially when it's abdominal surgery. So, but um, diet changes and everything else. But so yeah, so we're
So
gonna do this table talk. That's good.
yeah. So in my mind, you've come to Kansas, you've knocked on the door, and I've got the Colombian coffee on brew, and we're gonna sit down. We're gonna have a chat.
Sounds good.
All right.
Boy, we got a
So
few things to chat about, don't we?
it depends where we want to go with this today.
Oh my goodness.
So we
Okay.
talked about this being kind of a how, and based off of our other conversations during the blackout period, we'll call it the blackout period that we had with you. Um,
Yeah.
you know, Basically, how are we coping with the changes that are happening in our world around us?
Yeah.
And that can be what's happening politically, locally, nationally, internationally, or maybe even in the Super Bowl realm.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that just a little bit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, yeah, how are we coping with political changes?
Well, I have to say that show for me, I've been
Okay.
under the influence of anesthesia for quite some time.
That's
And
probably good.
and well, it yeah, in some regards it was good. Because I didn't have the focus that I needed to really pay attention to a lot of stuff that's going on. But as my focus is sharpened, um, now I'm seeing much more. And I would have to say that the more I see, the more I really want to go hide my head under a pillow.
Mhm.
But that's also not going to be very helpful. So,
Sure.
um, so I guess I'm doing okay. but I'm glad for the decision I made several weeks ago when I knew that I really had to focus on getting through the surgery, um, to really restrict the where I'm getting my information. And so I've done that. I'm trying to stay away from the talking heads and go more for the straight news. For example, the AP is a great source of that news, and I'm giving more time and attention to National Public Radio and public television. And then on top of that, what I've started doing is I've started fact checking some things. There's a couple of great websites out there. There's one's called Snopes, and there's another one called PolitiFact, that they look at the various stories that are floating around out there, and they just try to dig into about how accurate is this, how
Mhm.
true is this. And so that I found that to be really helpful in trying to parsing truth from fiction, or truth not even from fiction, but truth from opinion about what is going on. And that's been really useful. And I would recommend that to people as well, because I think we need to stay engaged so that we know what's going on. But I think it's really important that we pay attention to um, the quality of information that we're getting. What about you?
And
What are you doing?
well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't have I didn't have a surgery to focus on, but I think what I did was I think I unplugged for a while. Um, I was really tired and frustrated with everything. Just kind of the processes and the negativity and the information and disinformation overload that just
Hmm.
and still am, to be honest with you, to a point. um, and so I kind of unplugged. I didn't watch anything for quite a while.
Hmm.
Um, and part of it is because, well, let's put it this way: I tried to disengage as much as possible. It's sometimes it's impossible if you do any kind of online stuff. Stuff pops up. But I found that to be kind of refreshing. Um,
Hmm.
and things like YouTube or Facebook or other types of platforms, we've talked about this a lot, but there's hooks that are used and there's algorithms that are used to keep feeding you things or keep um, kind of highlighting incredible things that oh my gosh, I need to check this out when they're in fact not that great, not that exciting. But I really tried to stay away from some of that. I did look, I did, as I looked at more basic news outlets, the same, probably AP, 1440 Daily Digest that comes out, NPR, BBC. And I found that to be helpful. I also focused in more on local, what's going on around me. Also, what's going on around me that I may be able to impact or understand better.
Hmm.
Um, I found that to be an interesting and helpful kind of respite. I still listen to, and I think I just started listening to again. Let me put it that way. A few people that I did enjoy listening to. Jim Acosta is one of those, a former CNN anchor who left CNN, basically saying, you know what, I'm kind of done with this. I'm done with the way this works. And he now has his own show on Substack.
Hmm.
And so I'm listening to him. I get a newsletter from Heather Cox Richardson. I think it's
Hmm.
called Letters from an American, that I find
Right.
interesting. A guy in Heidi Burgess, who we interviewed during your absence. No, we interviewed
Hmm.
them before your absence, but
Right.
we put it out there while you were gone.
Right.
They have some really good stuff that comes out as well. So that's kind of who I'm listening to it, but that does kind of lean a little bit more to the center and left.
Hmm.
And I recognize that Adam Kinzinger, who is a former Republican senator, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, I listen to him on Substack too. Sometimes. So because I'm really trying to get a perspective of people who have been in the midst of all of this and are trying to work themselves through it, um, and not necessarily only trying to do a spin.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be careful from that.
You know, I just started also paying attention to the Bulwark. And the Bulwark is a publication that is done by a lot of folks that we would consider to be conservative Republicans.
Mm,
The
right.
I mean, one of the most prominent writers there is Bill Crystal, and this is a guy who a few years ago, when he spoke on the campus of a very progressive college in the Midwest, was hit with a pie in the face. I mean,
Oh,
he was so unpopular with the students there. But the same Bill Crystal now is writing on the Bulwark, and he's one of the people that's there, and they're giving a perspective that is kind of out of what we would consider the classic Republican position about what is going on, and I'm finding that to be really helpful and useful as well. Is paying some attention to some of the writers there. Sarah Longwell is another one, and you'll see her occasionally on PBS and listen here on NPR. She is a researcher, and she has done a lot of focus groups. She did a lot of focus groups leading up to the election in trying to understand the attitudes and the thinking about
mhm.
what was going on in the minds of different voters. And I find her stuff to be really interesting as well. But again, this is coming from a center right perspective. I think that some people that are in the world of President Trump would say that these are probably rhinos. That
Sure.
is Republicans in name only. I I don't know that I would agree with that, because I certainly don't see them as Democrats. I don't see them as people that are really progressive uh, by any means. But I find that perspective to be really useful as well.
You know, one of the things I did was I attended a couple of legislative updates here locally. Um, One in my hometown here in Heston, another just down the road. It's actually by the same leaders, because I was interested in hearing from two different communities, kind of what their concerns were. I thought this was fascinating. So at some point at some point in the discussion, and the two representatives were, one was a state or it was a representative in the state, and the other was a senator in our state. The At one point in each of the meetings, they were asked about their thoughts on what was going on in Washington, and both times they they said, no, we're really not. We're so busy, we don't have a whole lot of time to pay attention to what's going on in Washington. And I'm not saying that they're not busy, but on the other hand, I think that there's a bit of a avoidance. Uh, and then I took a look, and then I kind of thought about what they are talking about in Kansas, and other states are talking about too. In a sense, are all tied together with what's going on federally. It's just this is where kind of the rubber meets the road in some of those topics. For example, um, here in Kansas, there was um, an act that just went into law. It was vetoed by the um, governor, but then overridden by the the Kansas Congress. It's called the Vote. Actually, uh, Health Not Harm Act.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it was you know um, not allowing professionals to counsel or treat um, individuals who are in transition under the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I haven't read through all of
In
the
in
act.
in a In a gender transition, correct?
in a gender, yes, in a gender transition. Thank you.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I mean, and that got a lot of airtime, particularly in one of the meetings. And I thought, okay, that's not a an issue that's not out in, you know, in kind of the federal conversations. Another issue that came up here was the local conversations about abortion rights, um, and then education funding. I'm thinking, okay, yes, we're dealing with them locally, and we depend on our local representatives to keep us in the know and for us to be able to have influence there as well. But those are not just Kansas issues; those are
Yeah.
issues that are national issues as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's maybe a bit of a avoidance to say we're not really listening to what's going on nationally. The truth is,
Right.
yeah, we're actually dealing now on the ground with what's going on nationally.
Right. If that wasn't happening nationally, it's not likely that it would have been happening at the state level.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was very interesting to kind of listen to that conversation and the level of frustration that people brought to the table. It was really evident. Um,
Yeah.
you know, both those in support and frustrated with those who were not supporting, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the conversation is still pretty important and pretty hot.
I I can only imagine that that's going to get more so like that,
Yeah.
especially in these recent weeks. What we have seen uh, is that there appears to be an elected president and a president by default because those powers have been transferred unofficially to Elon Musk. Now
No,
that's how I
tell me more about why you see that.
well, I think it's very interesting. Donald Trump won the election last November, and he immediately sets up this Department of on Government Efficiency, right, or Doge.
Mhm.
I think I noticed that Heather Cox Richardson calls it doggy. So
Okay.
I don't know what the proper is. I don't know if it's Doge or doggy, but and supposedly Elon Musk is the head of that. And very recently, in fact, Sean Hannity interviewed Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk and tried to pin them down on what Elon Musk's role was with Doge, and they really couldn't say. I mean, it was even with Hannity, they couldn't quite say, well, yeah, he's an employee of the government or he's in charge of Doge, and it was very, very elusive um, about what the role of Elon Musk is, and yet at the same time, Mr. Trump was basically, saying, unofficially, Musk was saying things like, "I'm the enforcer." Of whatever the president wants to have happen. I'm the enforcer. Enforcer or the one calling the shots? It seems to me that Mr. Trump is very happy to drive around at the Daytona 500 and to show up at the Super Bowl and to do those kinds of things uh, and make proclamations. But I'm not sure he is in control. It seems to me that he has ceded a lot of power to Elon Musk. And that concerns me when I know the kind of access that Elon Musk is
Mhm.
trying to get in the Treasury and in the Social Security Administration. And I think when more of this comes to light, I think that in these town meetings, there's going to be a lot more of an outcry from people uh, when if these things go unanswered about, well, what is that level of access? How much data are they actually getting? And what are they going to do with that data? These are fundamental questions that are not being answered at this point. And I would be concerned if our state officials are not concerned about these things and not paying attention to these things.
Right. Well, once again, what happens there is going to impact what happens here at the state levels.
Absolutely.
And I think that to say that we're not paying attention, I just don't buy that. Well, let me ask you this. If you think that what you're seeing is Trump kind of, willing over his role in some part to Elon Musk, do you think he's doing that with other, or will do that with other appointees that he has going on? Is that something that you're thinking about?
Well, here, what I think is happening is I think that Mr. Trump is making some decisions with very broad strokes. He's saying, I don't like the Department of Education. I'm not sure we need the Department of Education. And so then he's going to cede that authority to the Secretary of Education. So he's going to make broad statements like that. And he's going to say, I want this to be downsized. And then he's going to turn it over them to downsize it. And it's like hands off, right?
Right.
And that's the pattern that I'm seeing, because okay, so this whole thing came out with somebody posting a picture of Trump with a crown on him and underneath that saying, "Long live the king." Okay. Does that mean that Donald Trump is really a king? No. But is it an expression of what he hopes? I keep going back to what we've said all along, which is he told us what he was going to do, and he's doing it, right? And so is that what he really desires? I don't know. I mean,
okay.
I don't want to take the cartoon seriously, but at the same time, everything that he's done are things that he said that he would do. And I really don't think, Lamar, that most Americans believed he would do
it. I would agree with you. And we've said that over and over again. If someone tells you something about what their plans are, what they're going to do, believe them until they show you differently, right?
Right.
And I think we can say that Trump has, even though he's been kind of grandiose in so many other things, he basically believes what he says.
Yeah.
At whatever level that is. So if we don't take Trump and others seriously, the danger is that change has just slipped in without us making a ruckus. Maybe we become passive.
Yeah.
I found myself when I unplugged that I don't know if I was passive, but I think maybe my wife felt I was passive about things because she was a little, she would point me on a few things to think about. But there's kind of this syndrome that you get when you feel you have given everything you can, or you have emotionally worked as hard as you can, and then you lose. It's almost like you have this letdown. And I would hope that we don't find ourselves in a situation where, Congress is kind of in a letdown mode, because we are going to depend on Congress to balance, the executive branch.
Yeah.
We're going to depend on the Supreme Court to balance what's going on. Even though, as we've talked before, it seems to be loaded, I don't think it's loaded necessarily as heavy as maybe Trump would like for it to be loaded. Now, that's just my opinion. I have no idea. So what do you think about that? Do you think that the Supreme Court is going to do their work, regardless of where Trump goes, what he wants? That's a loaded question, by the way.
Yeah, I know it is, but I got kind of a loaded answer. So I think, see, you're doing this because I'm still under the effects of anesthesia, right?
I
so
am,
I'm just
yeah.
gonna blow it out there. So here's what I think. I think number one, I think Donald Trump has an expectation of the Supreme Court, and he expects them to toe the line with him.
Okay.
And I think he not only hopes that, I think he really expects that of the Supreme Court. But the second thing I would say is this is very pessimistic. I don't think it's going to make a difference.
Oh, tell me more.
Whether they agree with him or whether they disagree with him, whether they overrule him or not, how does the Supreme Court enforce that? Already he's blowing off what lower courts have said, that that
Lower
they
federal
have.
courts.
Yeah, lower federal courts have said. He basically said, I don't need to follow what the courts say. Well, when it comes to the Supreme Court, what are they going to do? Are they going to call in the bailiffs to go after him? They don't have a police force. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
what authority do they have to actually enforce their rulings? Nobody has really answered that question at this point in time. What can the Supreme Court actually do if they overrule Mr. Trump, or for that fact, any president? And the Supreme Court set up this crazy dynamic anyway. They're the ones that came out not that long ago and said that, there is immunity for the president.
Right. That's right.
And whether that would be Joe Biden or whether that would be Donald Trump or whoever else, there's certain immunity that the president has. And so they set their own limits in a sense. And now if they come in and rule against him, I'd like to know, how do they intend to enforce that?
I think that's a really good question. Yeah. I think that trying to understand, even if the other branches of government are saying no,
yeah,
how do you stop someone who has disregard for the other branches of government?
That's right. That's
interesting,
right. And
it's an interesting dilemma.
And the funny thing is, we see the cartoon of Trump dressed as a king. But the point at which he begins to say, I don't really have to do what the Congress says, which he's basically done. I mean, a lot of the things that he has cut funding for are things that were allocated by Congress, that were put in place by Congress. And he has already run over the top of those and says, I'm not going to pay attention what Congress has allocated. I can suspend that if I like. He did that with USAID. He's likely to do that with other allocations as well. And now, if the Supreme Court rules in such a way that contradicts him, and he decides to go a different direction, now that cartoon of him being a king is not funny anymore.
Right.
Because he becomes a king.
So let's go back to what you just said about kind of the funding piece.
Yeah.
So something that came up in the local legislative update was the statement by, I think, one of our senators, was that all he did was put a hold on the funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to thinking about that. And when you put holds on funding, in any kind of budget, regardless of whether that funding was already approved and all the dollars were there, it was ready to go, putting a hold on it does not mean that it is not any less negative impactful. So, for example, if you look at funds that are going to be for food and nutrition,
mm-hmm.
just because you put a hold on it and say, well, we're just going to look at it, well, now you have a period of time where people are not getting what they desperately need on a regular basis.
Right.
If you put a hold on funding programs that maybe go to farmers for the kinds of subsidy work that they're involved with, whether it's
Yeah.
producing that kind of food or whether it's being involved in new programs where
Yeah.
they've already invested in either equipment or product, and their bills are coming due, but that funding is not coming through to pay those bills because it's on hold.
Mm-hmm.
That hold has a very negative impact on those farmers and other
Right.
people who are depending on a process to keep going. So
Right.
by putting a hold on it doesn't mean, oh, it's okay, we're just going to look at it. It has real life impact on people's welfare and jobs and businesses just
Yeah.
by being on hold too. And then if it
Right.
gets cut or promises are not kept, a program that someone is invested in for their business,
Yeah.
depending on dollars to come through, and now they're not going to come through, you're leaving people hanging with a huge debt. And so businesses and producers then are not able to continue. Um,
Right.
so I think we're going to see more of that. That's a
Yeah.
concern that I have. In addition, is these things that are happening have a huge domino effect in the negative.
They do. They do. And we just haven't seen it all yet. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with the Department of Education. We
Yeah,
don't know what's going to happen with Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We don't know. I mean, we have, for example, I mean, there have been some really fascinating missteps already. I mean, everybody that was working on bird flu was fired,
right, right,
and now they're trying to hire them. They've been hiring them back because they realize they really got a serious issue with bird flu that could become an epidemic, even a pandemic.
right.
And and so you know, you I I guess to my Republican friends, and I want to be really clear. I am not a supporter of Mr. Trump at all. All right. Never have been, never even watched The Apprentice, sorry to say. But I just, I have never cared for him. And I am not a supporter of Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. But I have friends that are, and I know people who are, and I respect them. And I've listened to their reasons for doing so. And while I may not agree with them, I respect their right to vote for whomever they wish. But I have this question for them. Is this really what you wanted? Did you want Elon Musk and all of his folks to have your personal data from the Treasury? Did you want them to be messing around with Social Security, especially if you're counting on a Social Security check each month? Did you want to see Mr. Trump buddying up to Vladimir Putin and 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 begin to sever our relationship with Ukraine and with the European nations? Is this really what you wanted? Is this what you expected? My hunch, Lamar, is that many of the good folks that I know that voted for Mr. Trump, they would probably say, no, this is not what I expected. Here's what I had hoped for. This X, Y, and Z would happen. That there would be some attention given to downsizing government and such. But I didn't expect this. At least that's what I believe. I don't think they were really expecting this level of chaos in the government.
Mhm. I think I would agree with you. If I go back to election cycles in the last two or three, I think I mentioned to be before on this podcast that I wasn't necessarily all that enamored by the Biden administration, particularly the last couple of years.
I don't disagree with that, by the way. I
Yeah,
wasn't either. I wasn't either.
I I think that I think there is a just cause, to take a look at how government has been developed over the years and what's working, what's not. Where are where are we spinning our wheels and throwing our money away and where we're not? I think that's good, just fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I've been on the side sometimes of having to do a downsizing, a reduction in force. I know on
Right.
a small, comparatively, on a small level, but still a very, very impactful level. I know what that does to people's lives.
Yeah.
And making those decisions without much discretion is abominable in my book. You
Right.
you have to understand the impact that has on people. You and I
Yeah.
talked about this a little bit a while back, that the difference here, yes, these are employees of the government, but the impact is on the people of the US.
Yes.
And that's different than a business. So you have to approach, in my book, you have to approach your role as a government leader not just as a business person, but certainly some, but also as a person who is responsible to care for a country full of people.
Yeah.
You can't just divorce the business part away from the people. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's missing. My hope, here's where I'm at, is I really want, I definitely want Congress to become more more not only impactful, but I want to hear their voice a lot more. I don't want to hear just the Democrats. I really want to hear the Republicans
Yeah.
get away from the fear and speak
Yeah.
their voice and be representative of the people in that they are elected to represent.
Yeah.
That's what good, bad, or ugly. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to hear good, logical, meaningful rhetoric.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get it, but that's what I hope for, because I think that's the only way. Now, we talked about, you and I've talked about, one of the things that I can do, you can do, is we can become more vocal ourselves, because we
Yeah.
have representatives, right?
Right.
You know, Kansas has some senators who are in Congress, and I can be vocal there. I can now. Some will say, "Well, that's a waste of your time."
Mm-hmm.
Well, is it the waste of my time? What do you
No.
think? Why is it
No.
not? Why is it not the waste of my time?
Well, for one thing, you live in a red state. And
Well,
then
that's true.
and
I
the
do.
people we want to begin to take some action are people are the Republicans, and so Kansas is one of those red states. It's elected a few more Republicans to Congress than what they have Democrats.
Yeah. Yeah.
I live in a blue state, with one exception. A guy who happens to be an
Yeah.
anesthesiologist, by the way, and I'm not too very happy with him at this moment. But he's a Republican, and the others are Democrats. And so,
Yeah.
probably the bigger question is, what good does it do for me to really call and leave messages? Well, I think it has to do with the power of numbers in both cases. Is
Okay.
that if we want our representatives to act on behalf of us, to really represent us, they need to know that there is a great crowd of witnesses behind them that are saying, "Hey, we need you to do this. We need you to act in this particular way." One of the things that I really wish for, Lamar, is that Republicans would step up and basically say, "Enough of the cruelty." There are some things that are going on that are exceedingly cruel right now. And two examples. One is certainly with the layoffs, just the mass
Yeah.
layoffs. You get an email that says you're not performing up to snuff, you're gone, right? Well, in the local news the last couple nights, what we are seeing here, because I live about 45 minutes from Washington, 45 minutes to an hour from Washington, and there's a lot of people that live here in Frederick that work for the federal government. We have a large research area here, that has a lot of federal employees at it, and people are being let go from those positions without any thought. They're just being told, just you're done. And now what we're seeing is that nonprofits are beginning to feel the effect of these people losing their jobs immediately and coming to them for help, and they don't have the resources to help them.
Mm.
This is going to have a ripple effect through the rest of our communities up here, as we're trying to figure out how do we absorb all these federal workers that are just suddenly out of jobs. And so there's a cruelty factor that comes into play there. And as you pointed out, that not only them directly, but indirectly, because they're doing things on behalf of the American people, all of a sudden
Right.
now, some of those things are going to happen more slowly, and they may not get done in as timely a way as what they need to be done. The other aspect that I find really cruel is in terms of how the administration is working with people that are here as immigrants, but they're undocumented in the
Mm-hmm.
country. I think it was the administration that put out a video. There was
Right.
no dialogue. It was showing immigrants being put into chains, put onto an airplane, and being flown to Guantanamo Bay. I know people living in fear
Mm-hmm.
that even though they are US citizens, and they have been for many, many years, they are worried that they could be caught in some of these sweeps because the sweeps seem to be indiscriminate. Even though they're saying, "Oh yeah, we're finding people here that are illegal, and they also are members of gangs or they're violent or whatever," they don't seem to be sorting that group very well. And a large number of those people that they're just kind of rounding up are people who are legal citizens, that are
Mm-hmm.
naturalized citizens. And they have to go through these extra steps to demonstrate that just to be able to stay with their families in this country. There's a
So,
cruelty in how this is being done.
well, it becomes cruel when you don't have a process that is about taking care of people.
Right.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I want to be clear about something, that I'm not saying that there aren't people here illegally that shouldn't be here. I'm not saying that.
no, yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
saying
I
that at
agree.
all. What I'm saying is that no matter how you do this, it has to be done in a way that still respects humanity. And
Mm-hmm.
and instead what I see is this kind of almost gleeful thing of this kind of behavior. And look at us, we're chaining people up, we're putting them on airplanes, we're flying them out of here. I'm really sorry, but that is cruel, bordering on sick.
And I don't want to minimize that at all. I think you're exactly right. I think that's people are living in fear.
Yeah.
And some would say, oh, they should be living in fear. Well, they've lived in fear for a long time, but this has really ratcheted up. It's made it
Yeah.
very real. I would say also, and I agree with you, there are people who shouldn't be here. I'm going to say it. I believe it. Um, but I think that we, as a production, a country that produces a lot of things, from food to to you know to whole goods. You know, we have depended. We know that you've heard this rhetoric a lot. We've depended on immigrants to help that process, to fill those
Yeah.
slots.
That's right.
Um, and and there are processes in place to make sure you're hiring people who are legal to be here in the
That's right.
US. And the government set that up. There's a checking process, and we do that. um, there are there are places where that doesn't happen, and I understand that too. I know, or I believe very strongly, that as consumers, we're going to be impacted significantly here this next year.
Yeah.
Already, the farmers in the South are saying we're not going to be able to get our
Yeah.
product out of the field.
Yeah.
And that sounds, maybe to some people, they don't care about that, but I will tell you that'll have a significant impact on what you choose as products, produce that you're wanting, you're wanting for your family.
Right.
Not only the price, but the availability. Something though on top of that that really kind of concerns me is the safety, or not just quality, but the safety of those products.
Yes.
First of all, you get rid of the oversight of whether those products are being produced safely, processed safely, and are safe and healthy for us to eat. Then on top of that, you have, if they're not, how do you handle the health side of for example, even
Not
things
e-
like
I
the,
think you're thinking E. coli.
thank you, E. coli. That's what I was looking for. That's the word I was looking for. How do you
Yeah.
handle those kinds of situations? Because that's so easily transmitted when we don't have good oversight, good regulations.
So recently, um, there's been this discussion about, at the administration, why do you have to cull all of the chickens that are infected with bird flu?
Right.
And they're talking about, well, there has to, because now the administration is worried about inflation. That is it.
Yeah.
Prices are going up again. And just recently, Trump said, well, that's not me. That was Biden, you know, and except that they're going to continue to go up if they enact some of the crazy rules they're wanting to do with the chickens, So the question was, well, why do we have to call all the chickens? Why do we have to kill all the entire herd, or not herd, flock of chickens, right? And but that's what they know, is that's how you stop the spread.
Yeah.
And that if you don't do that, yes, that's an extreme measure, but if you don't do that, there is still the
Yeah.
risk. And even if you bring new chickens into that farm, there's the possibility that
That's right.
they become infected. And so now what you're doing is you're making it even more expensive for the chicken farmers to raise their chickens, because now they've got to isolate chickens. If you don't want them to cull the entire flock, you have to isolate chickens, bring in new chickens, put in all of the safeguards in place to make sure that the sick chickens don't infect the new chickens. All of that's going to increase the cost of production, right? It's
Who
like,
eats that cost?
who eats that cost? Absolutely.
Right.
And it's like they do they actually have economists that are working in this administration, or have they given a bunch of calculators to people like me, you know, and said, you figure it out. I hate
Right.
to say it, but I've never been a real numbers guy, but I understand enough basically that you that that is all Trump is trying to do is to prevent the eggs from going up in price, but that's not going to do it. That's absolutely not going to do it. He's going to make it more expensive to produce eggs, and that cost has to be passed on somewhere. The farmers can't
So,
absorb it or they go out of business.
Tom, we've been on a rant here for a half an hour.
We've been on a rant. I've been, I so like I think we hit that part of my unfilteredness, that so
That's okay. That's okay.
well,
We're at the kitchen table. We've listened to each other, and I think we agree on a lot of. We have a lot of concerns.
a lot of concerns. Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of this administration, the way they're leading,
Yep.
and
Me
we're
neither.
not a big fan of just kind of sloughing off responsibility and giving it to someone else who doesn't have that kind of an insight into government, of how government works.
Right.
There's a lot of red flags here. I think what we can agree on, and most people would agree on, is we should pay attention, and we
Yep.
should be willing to make our voices known and hold
Right.
our public officials accountable if we have concerns, regardless of whether you are supporting the administration at some levels or not,
Right.
um,
That's right.
because this impacts all of us. So, if we were to recommend some things for some folks to do, one of the things I would recommend, and you and I've recommended this a lot, but let's do it again. We would recommend people get your information from a reliable source and try to stay in your lane, but yet as being willing to look at both sides of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would add to that. And this is going to probably shock a few folks and probably create some enemies, or maybe not enemies, but really disappoint some people that know me really well. I want Mr. Trump to be a successful president. That doesn't mean I want him to get his way on everything. Just in the same way, I don't want Joe Biden to get his way on everything, because then they're not a president, they're a king. But I want him to be successful in the sense that he governs wisely and that he leads wisely and he helps our country move forward in very, very positive ways. I'm not seeing how what he is doing so far is actually doing that.
That's fair.
But I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want him to be a good president, an honest president, a decent president, and to do things that are for the greater good, the common good of all of us. I really, really want that, because if he isn't, I'm really fearful of where we are 4 years from now. I really am. So I would encourage people to think about, what can I do to help this administration be better? And I don't think that means we sit back on our hands and do nothing. I think it means that we engage, as you were saying, that we reach out to our representatives, that we engage with others that have the ability to engage with the administration as well, for the common goal of making this as good an experience as possible for everybody, because we are still all citizens of this country. There's not only Republicans and there's not only Democrats, there's not only independents or Green Party folks. We are all citizens of this country, and we need to be able to move forward together as a country.
I've been listening to a book by Sarah Smarsh. Sarah Smarsh is a Kansas native. The second book I'm listening to is called Bone of the Bone. And she grew up just west of Wichita, I think. It's worth reading some of her work. And one of the things she's talking about in this section that I'm listening to right now that I can definitely get behind, and that is when you're working or you're interacting with people maybe that you disagree with, and this is something you and I have talked a lot about, that maybe we are on different sides of an issue, or maybe we're a little closer than we think to. You don't effect change by digging in your heels and attacking each other. You effect change by listening, by understanding, and by trying to move forward and trying to find good compromises. Things that you both find acceptable to move forward. So I think that's the key to making good progress here. And I'm not saying this is us talking to Trump, because that's not going to happen. Trump's not going to come knock on my door and say, "Hey, you want to have a table conversation?" No, it's not going to happen.
No,
but it is
going.
It is going to happen if I get out of my house or get off of my my computer or phone and sit down with people, whether they're my local legislators or my friends and colleagues, and say, what are your thoughts about this? Here's what concerns me, and here's what maybe we could do about it. I think that's where change can happen, and that's what we definitely want to recommend with that third space.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, I think we've We haven't really talked about politics at this level before, Tom, but
we haven't.
Before we started this episode, you said something that was spot on, and that was, Lamar, I don't think we can avoid it today. I think you're right. It might have been the anesthetics. I don't know.
Yeah, it might have been. Just the absence of filters. My God. Yeah. So. Yeah.
No, I appreciate this conversation, and definitely look forward to our next table talk, and we'll see where that goes.
All right. Sounds good. Well, hey, man, get warm out there.
Oh, will do. I'm ready for a change in weather, and by the time we drop our next podcast, my hope is that it's at least above zero.
Well, the next one will be coming out just before spring.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, that's right. So, all right.
All right.
Okay.
Take care, Tom.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.